From the dojo to the octagon, this is Budocast, your source for the latest in martial arts news, culture, and competition. From breaking fight results to evolving techniques, we cover it all. Let's get into it.
Yeah, glad to be here.
So, when you talk to a doctor about a medical diagnosis, there's a certain comfort and precision, right?
Oh, absolutely. Like engineering.
Exactly, like engineering. If you break your arm, the doctor just throws the X-ray up on the light box, points to that, jagged white line and says, there's the problem.
It's visible, objective, neatly categorized for you.
Right, which is, it's how we prefer most things in life, I think. We crave those measurable metrics.
Yeah, especially in the broader sports landscape, we rely heavily on those visible markers, We obsess over, punch stats, wingspan measurements, height advantages.
Historical win-loss ratios, all of that.
Right. We want the data to tell the entire story before the game even begins.
But the second you step into the world of combat sports, that metaphorical X-ray machine it shatters.
Completely shatters.
Yeah, suddenly you're looking at a landscape governed by invisible variables. Human will, accumulated trauma, generational fighting culture, and just the deeply murky psychology of a fighter's ego. You can't exactly put a tape measure around a fighter's heart.
No. And you certainly can't chart out the psychological weight of, say, a 5-year layoff on a spreadsheet.
Which creates a really fascinating analytical problem for us. You're constantly evaluating athletes whose greatest assets and often their most fatal flaws, they remain entirely hidden until the referee signals the start of the fight.
Until that cage door locks behind them.
Exactly. The data only takes you to the edge of the water. The actual fight is the plunge into the unknown.
And deciphering that invisible architecture of fighting is the mission of our deep dive today, because we've got a massive stack of sources in front of us covering the combat sports landscape this 4th of July weekend in 2026.
It's an incredibly dense weekend, yeah. It really is an incredible cross-section of the sport. We're talking about the raw folklore of early MMA pioneers, the sweaty, unforgiving grassroots of local community brawls, a wild geopolitical chess match of an international fantasy draft.
And, of course, the absolute blockbuster return of Conor McGregor against Max Holloway at UFC 329.
The big one.
Yeah, it's a remarkable snapshot of the entire fighting ecosystem right now. We're examining how the foundational DNA of the sport informs what we see today, and increasingly how high-level business strategy is dictating the violence we end up watching on pay-per-view.
Okay, let's unpack this, because it is the 4th of July weekend. And historically, in American combat sports, this weekend has always been synonymous with major paradigm-shifting milestones.
Always.
Yeah. Our sources from Low Kick MMA highlighted a historical figure who perfectly embodies the raw, somewhat chaotic spirit of this holiday. They dubbed him the ultimate American Don Frye.
Don Frye. The name alone serves as a time machine, right?
Oh, totally.
It takes you back to a very specific, almost mythological era of early mixed martial arts.
I look at archival footage of Don Frye, and I see a Hollywood casting director's absolute dream of a former Marine who owns a roadside steakhouse and settles disputes by simply staring a hole through you.
That's incredibly accurate.
Right. He had that iconic, thick horseshoe mustache,
Yeah.
the American flag trunks, and just this scowl that looked permanently carved into his face.
But the resume backing up that persona is terrifyingly real.
Oh, it's not an act.
Not at all. We're talking about a man who debuted in the UFC in 1996, won the grueling UFC 8 tournament, and then turned right around and won the Ultimate 96 tournament in that exact same calendar year.
Which is insane.
A workload that would literally be considered medical malpractice by today's athletic commissions.
Yeah, modern fighters fight 2, maybe 3 times a year if they're highly active.
Frye fought 11 times in 1996 alone.
11.
Yeah. But his importance isn't just in his sheer volume, It's the statistical anomalies of his dominance.
Like what?
Well, the UFC still officially recognizes that during his peak, Frye became the first athlete in the promotion's history to finish 3 different opponents in less than 1 minute each.
Let me stop you there. Because when you say finish 3 different opponents in less than 1 minute, I feel like newer people might not grasp how chaotic 1996 MMA actually was.
It's a Wild West.
Exactly. There were barely any rules, no weight classes, and guys were walking in wearing like a single boxing glove or a full karate gi.
Yeah.
So how did he systematically destroy people that fast? What was the actual mechanism of that success?
It really came down to a brilliant exploitation of range.
Okay.
In '96, MMA was still heavily rooted in a style versus style mindset. You had a pure kickboxer trying to fight a pure sumo wrestler.
Right. Everyone was highly specialized.
Exactly. The strikers wanted to stay on the outside, and the grapplers wanted to shoot for the legs. But Frye possessed a high-level collegiate wrestling background from Arizona State and Oklahoma State.
So he was a real athlete.
A very real athlete. But instead of just using it to take people down, he used his wrestling base to dictate exactly where the fight took place.
Interesting.
He would rush his opponents, completely bypass their striking range, and initiate a clinch.
For the uninitiated, can you give a quick 20-second breakdown of what a clinch actually is and why it's so devastating? Because, it just looks like two guys hugging against a fence to the untrained eye.
Yeah, it is anything but a hug. A clinch is a form of standing grappling where you secure physical control of your opponent's upper body.
Right.
Specifically, Frye was masterful at achieving underhooks.
Which is swimming his arms under his opponent's armpits.
Yes, to control their shoulders. Or grabbing the back of their neck to break their posture down.
Oh, nasty.
Extremely. Because once he had you trapped there, you couldn't swing your arms to punch him effectively, but he had the leverage to deliver devastating short-range uppercuts and knees.
So you're just stuck eating shots. Basically, he took away your balance and turned the fight into a phone booth brawl where he held all the structural advantages.
So he was weaponizing his wrestling to create a striking advantage. That makes perfect sense.
Exactly.
And the sources also point out he was the first to score both a knockout and a submission in under 1 minute.
Yep.
And the first to string together 5 consecutive knockout victories. He was essentially the bridge between the one-dimensional fighters of the early 90s and the modern, well-rounded mixed martial artists.
He was a prototype, in a way.
But he also completely leaned into the outlaw persona, right? Like, there's this legendary walkout at Pride 16 over in Japan. He marches down the ramp gripping a massive American flag. There's no polished PR team, no meticulously choreographed lighting cues, no energy drink logos plastered all over him.
No sponsors on the shorts.
Right, just this raw, unvarnished, terrifying intensity. And that makes me wonder, does modern MMA lack these larger-than-life folkloric figures, or have they just evolved into something else? Because today, man, everyone feels so incredibly sanitized and branded. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the elite, televised level of the sport has indeed undergone hyper-professionalization.
Yeah.
The UFC is a multi-billion-dollar corporate entity now. You don't get many unpolished brawlers like Don Frye headlining Vegas cards anymore because the talent pool is too deep.
Right, and the financial stakes are too high for sheer grit to overcome pristine, optimized technique.
Exactly, but that raw, unfiltered energy you're talking about, it hasn't disappeared from combat sports. It has simply been localized.
Oh, you're talking about the regional circuits, the grassroots level.
Precisely. If you are searching for the spirit of Don Frye's Pride 16 walkout today, you don't look at a pay-per-view at Madison Square Garden.
Where do you look?
You look at the sweaty local community events happening right now, this very Independence Day weekend. That boxing voice ran a fantastic feature on an event called Border Wars 19.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's down in Castleberry, Florida, at a place literally called the School of Hard Knocks Gym. I mean, it doesn't get more grassroots than that.
It is the absolute bedrock of combat sports. They have 30 fights scheduled.
30 fights?
60 fighters stepping into a ring in the sweltering Florida heat. You have an intense main event between local fighters Quan and Marvin battling for a regional 175-pound belt.
Wow.
You have Anthony Forbes taking on Vince Colbert. The promoters are actively enforcing fines on fighters who don't provide promotional footage.
That's hilarious. So grassroots, they have to find you to post on Instagram.
Right. Meanwhile, there's BBQ cooking in the parking lot and 4th of July fireworks going off in the background.
I love that visual. It's chaotic, it's entirely unpolished, and the financial payout for these guys is probably barely enough to cover their training gear.
Oh, maybe not even that much.
But the emotional stakes are astronomical. They are fighting for neighborhood bragging rights.
And that local pride scales up directly into the professional ranks. Consider the Davisian boxing card happening this same weekend in Cleveland at the Wolstein Center.
Okay, the Abdullah Mason fight.
Yeah, Abdullah Mason taking on Albert Bell for the WBO World Lightweight Championship, with Shu Carrington fighting Palacios on the undercard. Cleveland has a notoriously gritty, working-class fighting culture.
Very true.
The fighter bleeding for a plastic belt in Castleberry, Florida, is fueled by the exact same foundational territorial pride as the fighter headlining the Wolstein Center. It is the lifeblood of the sport.
Now, I want to take that concept of local territorial pride and stretch it to its absolute limits.
Okay.
Because combat sports isn't just about representing your neighborhood gym. It frequently mirrors massive geopolitical rivalries.
Yeah.
And that brings us to an incredible thought experiment from Low Kick MMA.
Ah, yes.
Which dropped perfectly in time with the July 6th, 2026 World Cup Round of 16 match between Mexico and England.
A soccer match happening at the iconic Estadio Azteca in Mexico City, playing out in front of 87,000 screaming fans at an altitude of over 7,000 feet. The nationalistic fervor surrounding that event was deafening.
And to capture that exact energy, Low Kick posed the ultimate combat sports hypothetical. If you lined up the absolute best 5-on-5 all-time MMA showdown between Mexico and England across history, who wins?
It's a great list.
It is. Let's walk through this fantasy draft, because the talent on both sides is staggering, but the stylistic differences are what really tell the story. Let's start with Team Mexico. They lead off with Brandon, the assassin baby Moreno.
A phenomenal starting pick. Moreno represents a massive shift in Mexican combat sports. He became the first Mexican-born UFC champion.
Yeah.
And what defines Moreno isn't just his technical skill, but his incomprehensible durability and pressure.
They have to talk about his rivalry with Davison Figueiredo. 4 fights against the exact same man for the flyweight title. That is practically unheard of in modern MMA.
It's historically rare.
The adjustments made from fight 1, which was a brutal draw, right?
Yeah.
To fight 2, where Moreno submitted him, to fight 3, where Figueiredo won it back, to the final fight in Brazil, where Moreno closed his eye and stopped him.
It was a masterclass in relentless, high-paced volume.
Just beautiful. Next on Team Mexico is Yair El Pantera Rodriguez, a Taekwondo striking wizard.
Rodriguez is a walking highlight reel, but we have to focus on his mechanics. His fight against the Korean zombie Chan Sung-dong is a permanent fixture in MMA history.
The famous 4.59 knockout. Round 5, literally 1 second left in the entire fight.
I want to break down exactly how he did that because it defies conventional physics.
Please do.
Both men were exhausted, throwing wild flurries in the center of the octagon. Jung rushes forward to land a combination. Rodriguez instinctively ducks his head down below Jung's waistline.
Right.
Now, 99% of fighters in that bent-over position will either shoot for a desperation takedown or cover up to survive the final bell.
Yeah, you're usually just protecting yourself at that point.
Instead, Rodriguez generates power from his hips, twists his torso, and throws a reverse elbow upward, completely blind, catching Jung perfectly on the jaw, instantly knocking him unconscious.
Unbelievable.
It requires a level of spatial awareness and fast-twitch kinetic linking that is almost alien.
It was pure, beautiful violence. Then we have Alexa Grasso, the first Latin American female champion who pulled off one of the biggest upsets of the decade when she choked out Valentina Shevchenko at UFC 285.
A huge moment.
But again, don't just tell me she choked her out. Walk me through the tape. How does a massive underdog take out a seemingly invincible champion like Valentina?
By exploiting a microscopic habit. Valentina Shevchenko is famous for her spinning back kicks.
Lethal kicks.
Very lethal, but they require her to briefly turn her back to her opponent. Grasso and her team studied hours of footage and noticed a specific tell in Shevchenko's hips right before she spun.
Oh, wow.
During the fight, the moment Shevchenko initiated the spin, Grasso didn't back away. She stepped forward and slightly to the blind side.
Okay.
As Shevchenko's foot missed, Grasso immediately secured a seatbelt grip around her waist, jumped onto her back while they were both still essentially standing, dragged her to the mat, and sunk in the rear naked choke.
Wow.
It wasn't luck, it was weaponized observation.
I love that phrase, weaponized observation. And then we have Diego Lopes. Now, he's a fascinating inclusion for Team Mexico because he was actually born in Manaus, Brazil.
That's a valid point, but the connection is deep and organic. He moved to Mexico, immersed himself in the culture, trains out of Lobo Gym in Guadalajara, opened his own academy in Puebla, and proudly walks out carrying both the Brazilian and Mexican flags.
The Mexican fans have entirely embraced him as one of their own.
Completely.
He is incredibly dangerous, sitting at 28-8 with 10 knockouts and 12 submissions. He just dominated Sodiq Yusuff and Brian Ortega at the massive Noche UFC Sphere event.
He looked phenomenal there.
But we have to mention the unique setting of his most recent victory over Steve Garcia. It took place in an event called UFC Freedom 250, which was hosted by President Trump on the South Lawn of the White House to celebrate his 80th birthday.
It is a remarkable detail to document. Taking a strictly objective historical view of the sport, hosting a professional mixed martial arts fight card on the lawn of the White House is entirely unprecedented. Regardless of the political framing, the logistical and security realities of erecting a UFC octagon at the executive mansion makes it a completely singular venue in combat sports history.
It's an undeniable milestone for how far the sport's cultural reach has expanded, objectively speaking. Finally, capping off Team Mexico, you have the heavyweight terror himself, Cain Velasquez.
A monster.
A two-time champion with an Arizona State wrestling pedigree. He was famous for cardio wrestling, basically possessing the gas tank of a lightweight while weighing 240 pounds.
Terrifying prospect.
Right. So looking at Mexico, you see a through line of bottomless cardio, devastating boxing fundamentals, and suffocating pressure. Now let's pivot to Team England.
England brings an entirely different cultural and stylistic flavor to the cage.
They lead off with Michael the Count Bisping, the pioneer of UK MMA. His defining moment was stepping in on 14 days' notice to knock out Luke Rockhold at UFC 199 to win the middleweight title.
Incredible upset.
But I want to pause here. When casual fans hear 14 days' notice, they might think, well, they're professional athletes. They're always in shape. Why is taking a title fight on 2 weeks' notice considered nearly suicidal in MMA?
I am so glad you asked that, because the biology of a fight camp is brutal. A standard UFC training camp is 8 to 10 weeks.
Okay.
It involves carefully periodized strength training, strategic sparring, and most importantly, a highly regulated descent in body weight. When you accept a fight on 14 days' notice, your cardio is rarely peaked for 5 rounds of combat.
You're just not conditioned for the distance.
Right. But more drastically, you have to compress an agonizing weight cut into a fraction of the time. You are forcefully dehydrating your organs, flushing water from your brain fluid and muscles at an accelerated rate.
Which sounds incredibly dangerous.
It is. You step into the octagon with a compromised chin, sluggish reaction times, and lungs that burn after 3 minutes. Bisping knocking out Rockhold under those physiological conditions is nothing short of miraculous.
That makes the achievement so much more insane. Following Bisping, we have Leon Rocky Edwards. We all know the highlight. UFC 278, down on the scorecards, landing a flawless head kick knockout over Kamaru Usman in the 5th round.
And again, the mechanics of that strike are what make it legendary. Edwards didn't just throw a blind kick.
He set it up
Beautifully. He threw a straight left-hand feint right down the middle. Usman, reacting perfectly to his defensive training, slipped his head to his right to avoid the punch.
Yeah.
But Edwards knew Usman would slip that way, and he had already launched his left shin precisely into the space where Usman's head was moving. He essentially forced Usman to headbutt his shin at maximum velocity.
The ultimate trap. Next up for England is Tom Aspinall, a 6'5" heavyweight who moves with the fluidity and footwork of a middleweight.
Scary guy.
Then we have Paddy the Baddy Pimblett, the charismatic former Cage Warriors champion who we'll dive deeper into shortly. And finally, Dan the Outlaw Hardy.
Oh, Dan Hardy.
The man who challenged Georges St. Pierre for the welterweight title and famously survived a deeply locked armbar for 5 agonizing rounds. Let's break that down too.
Yeah.
What happens physically when a guy like GSP locks in an armbar and extends it, and the other guy just refuses to tap?
It's grisly. The armbar aims to hyperextend the elbow joint past its natural range of motion. GSP had the arm fully isolated, hips raised, applying immense pressure.
Right.
When a fighter like Hardy refuses to tap, you aren't just dealing with pain tolerance, you are dealing with structural failure.
Oh, man.
The ligaments and tendons surrounding the elbow, the ulnar collateral ligament, the joint capsule itself, they begin to stretch, frag, and ultimately snap.
Just brutal.
Hardy managed to survive by subtly twisting his thumb to alleviate the optimal breaking angle, but he still absorbed catastrophic soft tissue damage simply through sheer, obstinate refusal to quit.
Okay, I've pushed back on this entire low-kick MMA thought experiment, though.
Oh, why is that?
As fun as it is to list these legends, is it really fair to compare a fantasy draft across vastly different weight classes? I mean, Tom Aspinall is a 260-pound heavyweight juggernaut. Brandon Moreno is a 125-pound flyweight. It's like comparing a battleship to a sniper. How do you even judge who has the better team when a literal fight between them defies the laws of physics?
That's a completely fair critique. The utility of a fantasy list like this isn't about simulating a literal 5-on-5 brawl in an alleyway.
Right.
It's a metric of divisional dominance and stylistic depth. When you look at England, their fighting DNA in MMA has historically revolved around gritty resilience and highly technical evolving kickboxing, particularly in the heavier weight classes, where absolute knockout power is prevalent.
But the Mexican team shattered their own stereotypes, didn't they?
Absolutely. For decades, the assumption in combat sports was that Mexican fighters were culturally geared toward boxing. Unbelievable chins, vicious body hooks, but vulnerable if taken to the ground.
Right, the classic brawler stereotype.
Alexa Grasso's victory over Shevchenko and Diego Lopes's terrifying Brazilian jiu-jitsu game represent a massive paradigm shift. It proved that the current generation of Mexican fighters are elite, world-class submission artists who have fully integrated grappling into their relentless pressure.
Speaking of shifting paradigms and evolving fighters, let's pull a specific thread from that Team England roster and look at Paddy the Baddy Pimblett.
Paddy the Baddy.
Because Paddy is moving rapidly from fun fantasy lists to massive real-world championship stakes. He just decimated Iron Michael Chandler at UFC 314, earning himself an interim lightweight title shot.
Which a lot of people didn't see coming.
Right. And now he is slated to co-main event UFC 329 against the incredibly dangerous French fighter Benoit Saint-Denis on July 11th.
Pimblett is a fascinating case study in modern MMA. His trajectory has been intensely polarizing. When he entered the UFC, hardcore purists criticized him heavily.
Oh, they tore him apart online.
They pointed out that he keeps his chin straight up in the air during striking exchanges, which is a fundamental boxing flaw. Yet he is holding a 23-4 record with 10 submissions. You absolutely cannot deny his functional success in the cage.
And outside the cage, he operates with the aura of a man who has been globally famous for a decade. He is naturally magnetic. But that confidence borders on extreme audacity, and it is currently stirring up serious controversy in the lightweight landscape.
He talks a lot of trash.
He has been taking aggressive verbal shots at the dual-weight champion, Ilia Topuria.
Which is an incredibly bold target. Topuria has been on a legendary, terrifying run.
Right. Topuria knocked out Alexander Volkanovski, knocked out Max Holloway, knocked out Charles Oliveira. But recently, Topuria fought Justin Gaethje at Freedom 250, and Topuria's corner actually threw in the towel to stop the fight.
Yeah, that was a wild night.
After that, Paddy Pimblett went on a podcast and completely dismissed Topuria. Paddy called him a fat featherweight who simply doesn't belong in the 155-pound division. He claimed he would eat Topuria's punches all day without flinching.
This raises an important question about the biomechanical realities of weight classes.
Yeah.
Is Topuria truly undersized for lightweight? Or is Paddy Pimblett relying dangerously heavily on his massive natural frame?
Let's get into the weeds on that.
We have to look at their body compositions. Topuria is a more compact, explosive fighter. His power doesn't come from raw mass. It comes from pristine boxing technique, kinetic linking, and speed. He generates immense torque from his hips.
And Paddy
Pimblett notoriously balloons up in weight between fight camps. He has admitted to walking around at 190, sometimes nearly 200 pounds, before cutting down to 155 for a fight.
Wait, let's break that down because, again, the numbers are wild.
Yeah.
A guy walking around 195 pounds is dehydrating and dieting down to 155 just to step on a scale, and then rehydrating back up to maybe 175 by the time he steps into the cage 24 hours later.
Yes.
What does that drastic expansion and contraction do to a fighter?
It takes a profound toll. While Paddy enjoys a massive size and leverage advantage on fight night, which heavily aids his grappling and submission game, that extreme weight fluctuation damages kidney function, drains muscular endurance, and most critically, it affects the fluids surrounding the brain.
Which compromises the chin.
Exactly, which can compromise a fighter's ability to absorb a punch. He is trading long-term durability for a short-term size advantage.
Which makes me want to ask you, the listener, a question directly. When you hear a fighter like Paddy Pimblett dismiss a phenomenal, technically flawless two-division champ like Topuria as just a fat featherweight, what do you hear? Does that show supreme, unshakable confidence of a guy who knows how to weaponize his size? Or does it reveal a dangerous blind spot? Because Topuria's power is very real, regardless of his height.
It's an incredibly dangerous game to play. Size matters in grappling, but at the elite championship levels of striking, speed, timing, and precision, almost always neutralize raw mass.
It's the old precision beats power adage.
Exactly. Pimblett's upcoming fight against Benoit Saint-Denis at UFC 329 is going to be the ultimate litmus test. Saint-Denis brings relentless forward-marching pressure. We're going to find out if Paddy's size and judo tosses can overcome top-tier, suffocating violence.
And as huge of a star as Paddy Pimblett is, he is just the co-main event at UFC 329. The real circus, the absolute undeniable main attraction that will stop the sports world on July 11th, is a rematch that has been 13 years in the making. But before we get into the return of the Mac, let's hear from our sponsors. Before we dive deeper, shout out to our sponsors. First up, Elite Sports, leaders in premium fight wear for BJJ and MMA. Whether you're rolling or striking, they've got gear built to move with you. Check them out at elitesports.com. And if you're a school owner looking to optimize your dojo's performance, you need to check out Lotus by Open Black Belt. It's the ultimate management software for tracking ranks, attendance, and billing. They're currently offering a free trial to our listeners. Streamline your business so you can spend more time on the mats. Visit openblackbelt.com to start your trial today. You can find links for both in the show notes. And if you've got a story, news tip, or question, send it to us at budocast.com.
Perfect.
All right, we are back, and we're stepping directly into the main event of UFC 329 at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. Conor McGregor versus Max Holloway 2. They're fighting at 170 pounds, the welterweight limit. And the historical context here is just staggering.
It really is. In the fast-paced timeline of mixed martial arts, 13 years is practically ancient history. We have to rewind all the way back to August 2013, UFC Fight Night 26 in Boston.
That feels like a lifetime ago.
It does.
It was only McGregor's second appearance in the UFC octagon. He beat Holloway by unanimous decision. But the context of that fight is crucial to understanding the rematch. During the second round, McGregor completely tore his ACL,
which is a catastrophic injury. The anterior cruciate ligament is essential for stabilizing the knee joint, especially during the rotational torsion required to throw a kick or pivot on a punch.
Exactly. I'll push back on anyone who just reads the box score, because watching that fight live, you saw the exact moment McGregor's mobility vanished. He threw a kick, his foot planted awkwardly, and you could almost see the structural integrity of his knee evaporate.
Yeah, his whole demeanor changed.
He had to completely abandon his legendary striking game. Instead, he relied almost entirely on his grappling and top control to smother a very young, very green Max Holloway for the rest of the fight.
The irony of that night is profound. Conor McGregor became a global superstar based on the touch of death power in his left hand.
Yeah, that famous left hand.
While Max Holloway evolved into arguably the greatest anti-wrestler and highest volume striker in the history of the sport, yet in their only meeting, the striker had to use wrestling to survive the volume puncher.
It's crazy to look back on. And if we look at the hiatus leading into this rematch, the paths these two men took over the last half-decade couldn't be more divergent. It's night and day. McGregor is returning from a massive, unprecedented 5-year layoff.
We literally have not seen him fight since that horrifying leg break against Dustin Poirier in July 2021 at UFC 264.
We need to explain the mechanics of that injury, too, because it wasn't just a sprain.
No, not at all. McGregor suffered a complete fracture of the lower tibia and fibula. The bones snapped entirely in half. The surgical repair required driving an intramedullary titanium rod straight down through the core of the tibia bone, secured with screws at the knee and ankle.
Just hearing that makes me wince. And even his planned return recently was derailed by a broken baby toe.
Right, the toe injury.
Which sounds minor compared to a snapped shin. But in combat sports, a broken toe destroys your balance. You can't push off to throw a straight punch, and you can't pivot to defend a takedown. So McGregor has been sitting, healing, and aging. Meanwhile, Max Holloway has been the absolute definition of active. Since McGregor's legs snapped in 2021, Holloway has fought 8 times.
And not just 8 tune-up fights. 8 elite-level, high-stakes wars against the absolute murderer's row of 2 different weight divisions.
Let's talk about the evolution of Max Holloway. He won the BMF title in one of the most spectacular moments in UFC history. For the listener who might be confused by the alphabet soup of belts, the BMF, or Baddest Mother F title, isn't a traditional divisional championship.
It's purely symbolic.
Right. The UFC created it as a symbolic belt to honor fighters who exemplify pure, uncompromising toughness and a willingness to fight anyone, anytime. Holloway fought Justin Gaethje for it at UFC 300.
And the finish of that fight encapsulated Holloway's entire fighting philosophy. He didn't just beat Gaethje, he knocked him out cold with 1 second left in the 5th round.
It's just iconic visual.
Holloway's style is based on volume striking. He doesn't rely on one single crushing blow. He relies on throwing combinations of 4, 5, 6 punches at a time.
The pace is just insane.
He overwhelms the opponent's cognitive processing speed. The brain literally cannot compute defensive reactions fast enough to keep up with Holloway's output, leading to systemic physical and mental exhaustion.
He drowned Gaethje in volume, then dropped down to 145 pounds to fight Topuria, then moved back up to 155 to defend against Dustin Poirier before losing the belt to Charles Oliveira earlier this year.
He's just been everywhere.
And now he's moving all the way up to 170 pounds to fight McGregor. Which brings me to the physical realities of this matchup. I want to use an analogy here. How does carrying 170 pounds affect two men who naturally built their careers at 145 pounds? To me, McGregor is a top-fuel dragster.
Okay, I like that.
He relies on incredibly explosive, fast-twitch muscle fibers. He burns immense amounts of fuel to generate devastating power in the first round. Holloway is a hybrid engine. He's designed for endless endurance and miles per gallon.
That is a highly functional metaphor. The biological reality is that extra muscle mass requires extra oxygen. Over his 5-year hiatus, McGregor has visibly packed on a massive amount of upper body muscle. He looks like a bodybuilder.
It's huge.
While that absolute mass might translate to terrifying single strike power in the first 3 minutes, those fast-twitch muscle fibers demand immense amounts of oxygen. The moment he has to grapple or defend Holloway's endless flurries, that muscle becomes a heavy, oxygen-starved anchor.
I'll gas out.
Holloway, conversely, isn't packing on bulky muscle to hit 170 pounds. He's essentially just cutting less water weight.
His biological engine remains highly efficient, meaning his output won't drop in rounds 4 and 5.
And the psychological warfare, the mind games, they're already in full swing. McGregor is holding court with reporters, claiming he is levels above Max. He's even taking credit for Holloway's entire career evolution. McGregor said that Max adopted Conor's techniques after getting controlled in their 2013 fight.
Wow.
Yeah. McGregor is promising to brought his paintbrush to put on a masterpiece inside the octagon. It's classic McGregor bravado, but look at the psychological tactic behind it. What's fascinating here is that McGregor is actively trying to trap Holloway in the past.
I see.
By constantly referencing 2013, he wants to implant the ghost of that younger, helpless Holloway into Max's current mindset. He wants to trigger self-doubt.
I don't think it's working.
No, probably not.
Holloway seems entirely unfazed. He responded by saying he wants to drag Conor into deep waters and drown him, promising to deliver an old Hawaiian-style beating. And then he dropped this incredibly chilling quote during a press conference. I get to assault this guy. He didn't say fight or compete. He said assault.
Because Holloway is banking entirely on the reality of the present. He knows that a 5-year hiatus creates a specific type of neurological ring rust that no amount of intense gym sparring can replicate.
Right.
The timing of an actual fist flying at your face under arena lights is impossible to simulate. We've even heard from Alexander Volkanovski on this matchup. Volkanovski has fought Holloway 3 times. He has spent an hour and a half locked in a cage trying to figure out Holloway's rhythm.
And what did Volk say?
Volkanovski explicitly pointed out that McGregor's prolonged absence will make it nearly impossible for his brain to process and react to Holloway's relentless shifting tempo.
The UFC executives clearly understand the fragility of this matchup, too. They're taking any chances. They have Mauricio Ruffy officially slated on weight as the backup fighter.
Very smart move.
Ruffy is a terrifying prospect, 5'1" in the UFC, and he literally just flatlined Michael Chandler in the first round at that Freedom 250 event we mentioned. So if McGregor's toe flares up, or someone slips on a scale, Ruffy steps in to fight. But assuming the MMA gods smile on us and we get the fight we all want, here's where it's really interesting. I want to talk about the famous last 10 seconds trope.
The Holloway special, the ultimate crowd pleaser.
Exactly. Max has this signature move. In the final 10 seconds of a grueling fight, he will literally stop fighting, point directly to the dead center of the octagon canvas, plant his feet, and invite his opponent to just throw wild, undefended haymakers until the horn sounds. We saw against Ricardo Lamas, and it resulted in the legendary knockout against Gaethje. So I have to ask, if we get to the end of round 5 and Max Holloway points to the center of the canvas, does Conor McGregor accept the invitation? Or is 5 years of accumulated wealth, ring rust, and aging too heavy a burden for a high noon shootout?
That is the million-dollar question, and it hinges entirely on ego versus biology.
Ego versus biology. That's a great way to frame it.
McGregor possesses arguably the largest ego in the history of combat sports. Historically, his pride simply would not allow him to back down from a direct, hypermasculine challenge like that. If Holloway points to the floor, McGregor's instinct is to bite down on his mouthpiece and swing.
Yeah, that's what we expect.
However, if McGregor is completely exhausted in the 24th minute of the fight, His survival instincts might override that ego. A fatigued fighter who plans his feet against Max Holloway is usually a fighter who wakes up staring at the ceiling lights.
And the stakes for this specific fight go way, way beyond just the night of UFC 329. Winning this main event isn't just about a paycheck or settling a 13-year-old grudge. It's about holding the keys to the future of the entire sport. This is high-level 3D chess playing out in real time.
The post-fight domino effect in combat sports is a massive economic driver. Fighters are no longer just athletes. They are the CEOs of their own promotional brands.
Max Holloway has already laid out his corporate master plan quite explicitly. He stated that if he goes out and beats McGregor in spectacular fashion, he plans to evaluate his options to achieve his ultimate dream, becoming a true two-division champion before he retires.
And who is he targeting for that?
In his mind, he has two targets. He is looking at either fighting Justin Gaethje, who currently holds the lightweight title, or bypassing him to challenge Islam Makhachev, who reigns as the pound-for-pound king and the welterweight champion in this 2026 landscape.
Those two options represent two entirely different paths to greatness. Fighting Gaethje promises pure violence. Fighting Makhachev promises a grappling puzzle that almost no one on earth has been able to solve.
Yeah, it's night and day stylistically.
Makhachev's Dagestani Sambo wrestling is designed to completely nullify the kind of striking volume Holloway relies on.
And this strategic multi-fight positioning isn't unique to MMA right now. If you look at the boxing world, as reported heavily by the analysts at Thai Boxing Voice, they are facing their own massive matchmaking dilemmas that perfectly mirror Holloway's situation.
Yes, the situation with Jaron Boots Ennis is a perfect parallel.
Ennis is caught in this massive promotional tug-of-war. Does he chase a fight with the undefeated knockout artist Virgil Ortiz Jr. up at 154 pounds? Or does he pursue the highly technical, extremely famous Devin the Dream Haney? It's fascinating because in 2026, fighters aren't just fighting the man in front of them anymore. They are constantly analyzing the market, positioning themselves for the most lucrative and legacy-defining next step. How do you compare Holloway's path to a second belt with Boots Ennis' search for a mega fight?
It fundamentally comes down to the classic divide in combat sports promotion: commercial weight versus purist weight.
Explain that.
In the boxing scenario, Haney versus Ennis might be the much bigger commercial event. It generates the viral headlines, it captures the casual fan interest, and it translates to massive pay-per-view buys. But Ortiz versus Ennis at 154 pounds, that holds far more purist weight.
Because it's a harder fight.
It is the high-risk, high-reward fight the hardcore boxing community demands to determine true generational greatness.
I see the exact same dynamic for Max Holloway.
Exactly. If Holloway chooses to fight Gaethje for the lightweight belt, you have a rematch with massive, undeniable, built-in history. The marketing team just has to replay the final 5 seconds of their UFC 300 fight on a loop, and the pay-per-view sells itself. It is a commercial juggernaut.
But the Makhachev fight.
But a fight against Islam Makhachev at welterweight, that is a pure, untarnished legacy play. That is attempting to prove you are the absolute greatest martial artist alive, regardless of commercial appeal.
Which makes me want to turn to you, the listener, and ask, is this corporate mindset actually good for the fans? Hearing these guys plot out their next 3 moves, analyzing risk profiles and marketability before they've even thrown a punch in their current fight.
It can be frustrating.
It's almost like watching slick executives negotiate a corporate merger in a boardroom while the actual product we want to watch is put on hold. Do we want fighters playing 2 steps ahead, playing matchmaker and businessman, or do we desperately just want them focusing on the physical assault directly in front of them?
That is the double-edged sword of the modern prizefighter. They have to protect their brand. But there is always a terminal danger in looking past the opponent standing across the cage, especially when that opponent possesses the explosive, fast-twitch power of arrested Conor McGregor. If Holloway is thinking about Makhachev in round 1, McGregor will separate him from his consciousness.
So what does this all mean as we wrap up this deep dive? We've covered a staggering amount of ground today. We started with the grassroots blood and sweat of Border Wars 19 in Florida. We analyzed the global pride of the Mexico-England fantasy matchups. We broke down the biomechanics of Paddy Pimblett's controversial weight cuts. And we explored the massive historical implications of McGregor versus Holloway too.
We have spent the last hour talking entirely about how legacies are cemented by tangible achievements. By the physical belts, the highlight reel knockouts, the brilliant strategic chess moves, and the undeniable statistics. But I want to leave everyone with one final invisible variable to consider. What if the trauma of the leg break, combined with the extreme 5-year layoff, has fundamentally changed Conor McGregor's internal relationship with losing?
What do you mean by that?
If McGregor steps into the octagon on July 11th and realizes within the first 90 seconds of the fight that his timing is irreversibly off, if he feels Holloway's pace and recognizes that the masterpiece he promised the media is physically impossible to paint, how does he react?
That's a scary thought.
Does the matured fighter finally gracefully pass the torch to Holloway? Or does the colossal ego refuse to accept the reality of an aging body, resulting in a desperate, deeply tragic end to the fight? Don't just watch the punches. Keep a very close eye on McGregor's body language in round 1. The subtle shifts in his posture might tell us exactly how the next decade of MMA unfolds.
It all comes roaring back to that X-ray machine we talked about at the very beginning of the show. You cannot see a fighter's changing relationship with their own mortality on a medical scan. You cannot measure a fractured ego, you cannot quantify 5 years of psychological rust, and you cannot weigh the phantom burden of a 13-year grudge on a doctor's scale. The metrics fail us. You just have to lock the cage door, step back, and watch the muddy waters settle. That's it for this episode of Budocast. Thanks for joining us as we break down the latest in martial arts. We'll be back soon with more news, stories, and insights. Until then, train hard, stay humble.